Hi everyone, my name is Madeline Douglas and I'm going into my 4th year of psychology at Lakehead University. The reason that I decided to go to Lakehead is I'm from Thunderbay, so I decided to go to Lakehead to stay close to home, and also I had lots of friends that were making the same choice to stay in Thunderbay, so that was a large factor in why I decided to pick Lakehead. I chose psychology as my major in grade 12 because I was unsure of what I wanted to do after, and I felt that psychology was a good option to be able to explore all my other interests and then ultimately decide if I was going to stay in psych or switch into a different program. So the pros of Lakehead and psych in general, I would say that if you like being outside, you really like outdoorsy things, Thunderbay is a perfect city for you. We're surrounded by nature. Lakehead also offers really small class sizes, which I think is beneficial, especially to my type of learning. You can foster really close relationships with your teachers. The smaller size of the university also means that you're not competing as much for research opportunities, exec positions on clubs, or volunteer opportunities. And all of the profs that I've had in psych have been amazing. There's definitely some standouts for sure, but they've all been really great. Some of the cons of Lakehead, I would say, is, again, it is a smaller university in a smaller town. So if you're looking for like a big city experience, like going to U of T, it's definitely not going to provide the same environment. I knew that psych would fit my interest because I did initially have a large interest in healthcare. I was contemplating between nursing and psychology and ultimately picked psychology because it was less restrictive. You had lots of options to do electives in other disciplines, which I found to be very useful, but it was still healthcare. It was still in the behavioral sciences department. The culture at Lakehead, I would say, is overall very helpful. In terms of psych or any kind of program that might lead you to professional schools like medicine or pharmacy, any type of program like that can be somewhat competitive. I would say for psychology, it's mostly lectures. Depending on the class that you're taking, you might have some, like a lab component as well. So for any of your like cognitive psychology classes, or your stats classes, research methods might have a lab as well. And then there's also ample opportunity to get hands-on experience like I was talking about before. You can either volunteer in a research lab, which means you won't get it for credit, or there is an opportunity to, I believe it's a second-year class, to work in a research lab and get a full credit for it. So the pace of the class depends on what type it is, specifically what kind of psychology class it is, or if it's an elective class. The type of psych can vary quite a bit. Some of them are pretty intense, I would say, like psychopharmacology, which is very similar to pharmacology that nurses take, can be quite intensive, but your intro classes aren't going to be, like intro to psych is not going to be super intense. So it really just depends on the year level and what kind of psychology. I would say in general it's a pretty even split between tests and assignments. I've had some classes where the year prior it was very test heavy, and then I've taken it and it's super assignment heavy, so it really depends on when you're taking it and who's teaching it. First year, like I said, you only take intro to psychology. It's a full year course, so that means you have 4 full credit electives to fill. So it really depends on what you're taking. If you're taking an honors Bachelor of Arts or an honors Bachelor of Science, that will kind of dictate what electives you're taking, and then you can sort of gear that towards your interests. So I took in my first year intro to political science because I thought I might want to have a minor in poli-sci, but I know other people who took women's studies, other people took sociology. It really just depends. University exams differ from high school exams because, at least in my experience, they were typically weighted a lot more than my high school finals, and they covered a lot more material. I don't think in high school I ever had a cumulative exam, but I've had quite a few in university. And also I've had exams in university that are worth like 80% of my mark, whereas in high school I believe the highest I ever had was 30%. So you can't really use the same study habits that you had in high school. Cramming doesn't really work when you have an 80% final that's all of the material you've learned throughout the semester. To be successful in psychology, I would definitely say that you need to improve your critical thinking skills as well as reading skills and memorization. You're going to be doing a ton of reading. If you're taking 5 classes at a time and they're assigning multiple chapters per class, you're going to be reading a lot every single week. And depending on the type of psychology, again, there's lots of memorization involved. And then overall, just a positive attitude. It's going to be a lot easier to get by if you have a positive outlook on your situation, if you're reaching out for help from professors, your marks will reflect the effort that you put in. And if you're bringing like a positive attitude to the table, people are a lot more willing to put in the time to help you succeed. In terms of studying and how I study, I would say that it's a very individualistic process. What I recommend to you may not be useful, but in terms of what I do, I go to lecture and take my laptop and take notes, typically just the lecture slides, unless it's not a recorded class. If it's not recorded, I focus on what the teacher is actually saying. Unless they don't post the lecture notes, then it's kind of up to your discretion. Either write down what they're saying or write down the lecture notes, whichever is more helpful. In terms of like Zoom classes and stuff, again, I'll take lecture notes and then go in with my iPad and write out what the teacher says, and then read the textbook and write in any additional information. And then I also like to use programs like Quizlet to help with active like recall and being more engaged with studying. First year, like I said, you take a lot of electives. The only psychology class that you have is Intro to Psych, which is a full credit course. And then in upper year courses, it really depends on which psych you're taking. All psych majors have to take a full credit in each subcategory of psychology, so Lakehead breaks it down into 5 categories, I believe, based on what kind of psychology it is, and you have to take a full credit of each so that you get like a diverse knowledge of psychology as a whole. You can't just focus in on one area. So upper year courses, you're able to take a minor or specialize in a different area. There's also double majors that you can do with psychology, so it's very broad. Psychology often requires, like I said, a lot of reading and memorization, but there will also be classes where you have to do written assignments or papers formatted with APA formatting. Some courses can be quite writing heavy and writing in a research sense, so that's also important to keep in mind that it's not just all test-based. Depending on what you like, you can decide between Psych as a Science or Psych as an Art. Obviously, Psych as a Science takes science electives, so in my first year I took calculus, biology, physics, chemistry, and then when I switched into an art in second year, I took sociology, political science, law classes. There's like a very large variety of avenues that you can go down depending on whether or not you're having an HBA or an Honors Bachelor of Science. For early admissions, based on your grade 11 marks, they need to be 80s-ish, and then if you're applying with your 5 best grade 12 credits, the minimum is a 70 average overall, but if you have that early admissions, then you just need to maintain that 70 average throughout grade 12 to keep your admissions. Now, in terms of scholarships, Lakehead gives away, I believe they said $11 million annually to students in the form of bursary scholarships and awards. Although you only need a 70% to keep your admission, I would definitely recommend keeping your grades as high as possible because Lakehead does reward students who have over an 80 average. I know when I was applying, they had free tuition for anybody who had over a 95 average. I believe it's not free anymore, but it's still quite high. And there's a ton of entrance scholarships as well as internal awards. Once you are in first year, you can apply to all the internal awards. There's entrance scholarships like alumni scholarships as well as other large awards like the President's Award, I believe is $10,000. So in grade 12, I would definitely recommend that you tailor your courses to what your interests are. So for instance, if you think that in the future you want to apply to a science major like chemistry or biology, try to take the grade 12 science classes and try to gauge it to what you're best at or what you're interested in. I didn't even know my high school had like philosophy classes and stuff, and I really wish I could have taken them. For university, I would recommend taking like a general English class in your first year. They have one that's called Intro to Professional Writing, which teaches you how to format emails, cover letters, references, business letters, that kind of stuff, which is probably the most useful class I've taken in my university experience. The difficulty of class depends, again, on your strengths and weaknesses. Intro classes are typically not that difficult, even if you didn't take it in high school. I'm not sure if there's prerequisites, but even if you didn't take, say, chemistry in high school, intro chemistry is not that difficult. So if you're looking to sort of branch out, I would definitely recommend taking an intro class. And if you find something that you really enjoy, there's always a possibility of taking it as a minor. So for instance, I'm taking a political science minor. I have friends in psychology who are minoring in biology. For course registration, Lakehead has this program set up. I believe it's called FastPass. It's where they show you how to pre-register for all your classes as soon as the timetable comes out. And once you build that pre-registration, on the day of actual registration, you can just go in and register for all your courses that you've planned out ahead of time. I would definitely recommend checking your degree audit, which is under My Info, and making sure that you're taking the proper amount of classes in the right type. Also, a big tip I would say is make sure you register early as soon as you possibly can. I know people that do leave it to the last minute and they're completely fine, but depending on the classes that you want, they fill up quickly. My career path is slightly different, I would say, than the average psych major. I've decided to go to law school, which is 100% possible coming from a psych degree, but I would say the typical routes would be clinical psych is probably the most common, or med school. There are a lot of different master's programs that you can do in psychology that are not clinical psych, that are more research focused. Like I said, the most common professions, I guess, following a psych degree would be a psychologist. Typically that requires you to get a master's, which is a 2-year program after your undergrad, or continue on into an MD program to be a psychiatrist. There are no internships or co-ops with psych. Experience outside of a laboratory setting is not really expected, I don't think, for most master's programs. There are some opportunities to work in a psychology office or a related field, but it's not necessary. And then there is no large recruitment process for psych. So I lived off campus at home throughout my entire university undergrad because I'm from Thunderbay, but I had friends that lived in residence and they said they made a ton of friends. It was really fun. It's really convenient. Dorms are very close to campus. I believe there's 4 different dorm styles that Lakehead offers. There's the standard room, a room with a sink, which is a slight upgrade, I believe. Townhouses, which are normally upper level year students. I knew people in second year that had townhouses. And then I believe they also offer apartments. There's also tons of rentals in the area surrounding the university, and the cost of living isn't very high. Lakehead doesn't really have a huge party culture. People definitely still go out to the bars and have house parties, that kind of thing, but I wouldn't say that Lakehead's a party school. Areas that are popular on campus, I would say, are the Outpost, which is our campus bar. People like to go there between classes to get a drink. The Study is also super popular, and then pretty much every building has renovated study spaces. I really like the alumni hallway. It looks out onto the lake. I also like studying in the ATAC. Clubs that I suggest getting involved with, I would say there's 4 main ones that I think are really good. There's definitely tons of clubs to suit every interest. These are just the ones that I participated in and really enjoyed. The first would be Lakehead Interprofessional Student Society. It's meant to foster interprofessional collaboration, and it really helps building teamwork skills and working with other healthcare professions. So it's a very interdisciplinary club. Nurses, social workers, psychology students all get together and plan events. It's really fun. There's also Rotary, which is an international club, but Lakehead has a chapter that's for students that are 18 to 30, I believe, and they're very involved with the local community, so lots of volunteer work, social events. Lakehead Community Outreach is another one where they provide volunteer opportunities, but it's more of a self-driven way to volunteer. You volunteer by yourself and then submit hours. And then the last one is Shelter House Volunteer Group. They volunteer specifically at the local soup kitchen, and they also run fundraisers for Shelter House. I also didn't do exchange or study abroad. I would have loved to, but COVID happened. I know Lakehead partners with, I think it's almost 30 different universities around the world. So it's definitely something to look into if you're interested in it. To make friends, I would definitely recommend participating in clubs. That's probably the easiest way for somebody who's not in residence to make friends. If you're living on campus, I would definitely say participate in residence life activities or activities at your house plans together, and talk to your roommates or your dorm mates, the people that live next to you, and talk to people that are in your classes. I know it can be kind of scary, but everybody's in the same boat. And if you're in the same class, then you already share a common interest, and that's probably one of the easiest ways to branch